She was pregnant, hungry, and abandoned by the very woman she called mother. One painful night turned her world upside down, and the man she loved was dragged to prison for a crime he never committed. Broken and homeless, Jacinta begged a stranger for leftover food, never knowing he was the billionaire who would uncover the truth, rewrite her destiny, and expose a secret that would shake everyone. Before we begin, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss our emotional and inspiring stories. Let's dive in. Jacinta had never believed that love could grow in the most unlikely places, certainly not beside a dusty roadside where old shoes lay scattered like forgotten stories. Yet that was where her heart found its home. Every morning, as she walked to the local market, she would see him, Johnny, the quiet shoemaker, whose life seemed stitched together with patience and humility. Johnny never shouted like the other artisans. He never chased customers or begged for work. He simply sat on his wooden stool, head bent, hands steady, repairing shoes with the kind of tenderness one would use to mend a broken heart. And every time Jacinta passed by, he looked up with that soft smile, gentle, respectful, warm. It was a smile that made her steps slow and her chest flutter for reasons she could not explain. Jacinta came from a comfortable home. Her mother, Madame Grace, was a woman who measured human worth by the thickness of wallets and the shine of cars. To her, dignity walked hand in hand with wealth. Poverty was a disease she believed only the foolish caught, but Jacinta was different. She saw beauty in humility, strength in simplicity, and truth in Johnny. One Thursday afternoon, with the sun high and harsh, Jacinta stopped by Johnny's stand with a torn sandal. It wasn't really torn, just a tiny stitch undone, but she needed an excuse to stand close to him. "Can you fix it for me?" she asked softly. Johnny did not touch the sandal immediately. He looked at her first, his expression wrapping around her like a warm blanket. "Of course," he said. "Sit, it won't take long." She sat. That day they talked more than usual. They laughed. Jacinta found herself sharing things she had never said to anyone, not even to her mother. Johnny listened, really listened, with eyes that held sincerity deeper than gold. That evening, as she walked home, she knew her heart had crossed a line it could never return from. Days turned into weeks. Their bond grew, not in loud declarations, but in silent companionship. She brought him roasted corn sometimes. He gave her free repairs even when she insisted on paying. They talked about dreams, fears, life. They talked like two souls who recognized each other in a crowded world. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and turned the sky orange, Johnny cleared his throat nervously. "Jacinta," he began, voice trembling just slightly. I don't have much. I don't even know if I'm worthy of you, but you've become the most important part of my life." Jacinta blinked rapidly, her heart pounding. Johnny reached into a small bag and brought out a tiny velvet pouch. Inside was a silver ring, not fancy, not expensive, but bought with months of saving and sacrifice. "I love you," he whispered. "Please, will you marry me?" Jacinta's breath caught. She felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming tenderness. "Yes," she breathed. "Johnny, yes." He exhaled in relief, his hands trembling as he slid the ring onto her finger. They hugged, clinging to each other like two hearts afraid to ever let go. But love, as beautiful as it is, often attracts storms. The day everything changed. Johnny came with elders to ask for Jacinta's hand. They dressed in their finest traditional attire, carrying cola nuts and wine as custom required. Jacinta wore a simple gown, her heart bursting with excitement. But Madame Grace stood at the center of the living room like a storm waiting to strike. Her eyes scanned Johnny from head to toe, the worn shoes, the cheap shirt, the humble posture. She sneered as though smelling something rotten. "So, this is the man?" she asked coldly. Johnny bowed respectfully. "Good afternoon, Ma." Grace didn't answer the greeting. Instead, she folded her arms and laughed, harshly, mockingly. "Is this a joke? My daughter, my only child, marry a shoemaker?" Jacinta's face burned with embarrassment. "Mom, please." "Shut up," Grace snapped. "I warned you about associating with poor people. See the nonsense you've brought into my house." Johnny kept his head down, absorbing every insult without reacting. His elders remained calm, respectfully pleading their case. But Grace was a stone, cold, unmoving, Unreasonable. You will never marry my daughter, she declared. Not while I am alive. Mother, I love him, Jacinta cried. Love? Grace scoffed. Love does not pay bills. Love does not buy houses. Love does not take care of a family. Poverty destroys marriages, Jacinta, and this poor boy wants to use you to climb out of his misery. Johnny felt the words land on him like blows, but he remained silent. If you marry him, Grace continued sharply, you are no longer my daughter. The room fell still. Jacinta's heart cracked. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the man she loved and the mother she feared losing. Johnny stepped forward, voice calm but heavy. Ma, I truly love your daughter. I will work hard. I said, get out of my house, Grace screamed. The elders rose quietly, touched Johnny's shoulder, and guided him toward the door. Jacinta ran after him, sobbing. Johnny, I'm so sorry. He wiped her tears gently, even though his own heart was bleeding. It's not your fault, he whispered. Some mountains take time to move. As Johnny walked away that day, Jacinta felt her world shaking. Something inside her told her that the path she had chosen would not be an easy one, and her mother's wrath was only beginning. Jacinta barely slept after the disastrous introduction ceremony. Her mother's harsh words echoed in her head like a curse. If you marry him, you are no longer my daughter. Those words lingered like smoke in a closed room, choking her soul. She loved her mother, she respected her, but she loved Johnny. Differently. Deeply. In a way she couldn't explain. The thought of losing either of them felt like losing oxygen. The days that followed were a nightmare. Madame Grace became an interrogator in her own home. Every morning she watched Jacinta with cold, suspicious eyes as if monitoring a prisoner. She banned her from going out except for essential errands. Her phone was seized on some days. She threatened to lock her indoors if she dared sneak out. It was torture, emotional and psychological. Jacinta, Grace would say, pacing like a lioness guarding territory, I will not watch you throw your life away over a roadside shoemaker. If your father were alive, he would collapse at the thought. Mom, Johnny is hardworking. Hardworking, Grace barked. Hardworking people don't sit under umbrellas mending dead shoes all day. He wants your inheritance. He wants your future. Mom, Johnny isn't like that. Oh, please, Grace snapped with disgust. Do you think poor people have genuine intentions? They grab any opportunity to escape poverty, even if it means using girls like you. Every word stabbed Jacinta like a dagger. At night, she cried silently. In the morning, she stole moments to peek out the window, hoping to see Johnny walking by, even though she knew he wouldn't. He respected boundaries too much to cause trouble for her. She missed him, terribly. One Sunday afternoon, while Grace was at a business meeting, Jacinta escaped through the back gate and rushed to Johnny's workshop. When she saw him, her heart broke. His eyes had lost their sparkle, and his hands shook slightly as he stitched a shoe. Johnny, she whispered. He looked up slowly, and when he saw her, something inside him lit again. Jacinta, you shouldn't be here. She didn't care. She ran into his arms, desperate for comfort. They held each other tightly, clinging as though the world was crumbling. I'm losing her, Jacinta sobbed into his shoulder. She's making me feel like I'm losing you too. Johnny held her face, wiping her tears with his thumb. You won't lose me, he said softly. Love is not a crime. But if she refuses forever, if she disowns me, if she cuts me out of her life completely. Johnny swallowed hard. He had always been the strong one, but even he felt the weight of her words pressing against his chest. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family, he whispered. You're not, she insisted. She wants to control my life. She wants to force me to marry a man I don't love. Johnny breathed deeply, the pain clear on his face. I don't want to fight your mother. I don't want to steal you away. I just want us to be happy. Jacinta's breath trembled. Then marry me. I already asked, Johnny said with a sad smile, and she already said no. Jacinta's desperate plan. She stepped back, her eyes full of a fire Johnny had never seen before. What if she didn't have a choice? Johnny frowned. What do you mean? What if I get pregnant? Her voice was barely a whisper. Johnny froze. What? If I'm pregnant with your child, she has no option but to accept us. She would never allow her grandchild to be born outside marriage. Jacinta, Johnny's voice shook. No, 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 that is not the solution. It is, she insisted. It's the only way, Johnny. She will never accept you otherwise. Johnny stood, pacing slowly, running his hand over his head. This is a child we are talking about, not a peace offering, not a weapon, not a bargaining tool. I know, Jacinta murmured, tears in her eyes, but I'm losing you. She'll marry me off to one of those men she keeps bringing home. Johnny stopped pacing and faced her. I don't want you to get pregnant out of fear, he said firmly. A child should begin with love, not desperation. It is love, she cried. I love you. I want a future with you. I want to build a home with you. Please, Johnny, I'm scared. I'm tired. I'm suffocating. Her voice cracked in a way that shattered him. He pulled her close again, pressing his forehead against hers. You're asking me to choose between doing what is right and losing you, he whispered. I'm asking you to fight for us, she replied. Johnny's heart pounded. He had always believed in patience, in destiny, in doing things the right way. But as he held Jacinta that night, feeling her trembling hands, hearing the fear in her voice, something inside him broke. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her. And so, against his principles, against his conscience, against everything he stood for, Johnny gave in. Weeks passed. Jacinta waited anxiously, counting days, battling fear and hope. Finally, one morning while washing her face, she saw the undeniable signs. Her hands shook as she held the pregnancy test. Positive. Her heart raced. She pressed the test to her chest and cried, half from joy, half from dread. Johnny was shocked when she told him, happy, but also worried about what would come next. He held her as she cried in his arms. But the real storm arrived when she told her mother. That evening, Madame Grace was at the dining table eating fruit when Jacinta stood before her, hand on her stomach. Mummy, I'm pregnant. Grace laughed lightly, not understanding. Pregnant? With which suitor? Ase? Brian? Or Johnny? The fruit fell from Grace's hand. Silence. Then a dark, slow fury rose in her eyes. What did you just say? I'm carrying Johnny's child. Grace stood abruptly. The slap came so fast, Jacinta barely saw the hand. You fool, Grace screamed. You disgrace! How dare you? How dare you allow that useless shoemaker to touch you? Mummy, I love him. I don't care, Grace shrieked. He trapped you. He has ruined you, and I will ruin him back. Before Jacinta could speak, Madame Grace stormed out, grabbing her phone, dialing contacts, making threats, plotting revenge. And within hours, the trap snapped shut. Jacinta never imagined her mother, her own mother, would become the storm that destroyed her life. But that night, as Madame Grace paced the compound, shouting into her phone, her anger grew into something darker. Her voice trembled with rage. Not disappointment, not fear, it was hatred. A pregnant daughter for a shoemaker? She hissed into the phone. No, no way. I will teach that boy a lesson he will never forget. Jacinta followed her outside, begging, crying, clinging to her wrapper. Mummy, please, don't do anything to Johnny. Please, it was my decision. But Grace shoved her away. Leave me alone, you silly girl. You think you're smart? He tricked you. He trapped you. No, he didn't. Shut up, Grace roared. I will not allow poverty to enter my lineage. Over my dead body. She stormed into her car, slammed the door, and sped off into the night, leaving Jacinta trembling at the gate, praying, pleading with the universe. Johnny was closing his shoemaking stand that night. He'd just finished polishing an old man's shoes. His hands were tired, but his heart was strangely peaceful, because despite all the hardship, he knew Jacinta loved him, and he loved her. He didn't hear the police van until it screeched to a halt in front of him. 4 officers jumped out. You are under arrest, one shouted. Johnny froze. Arrest? For what, sir? Before he could finish, another officer swung a baton, hitting his arm. Johnny cried out, gasping, Sir, please, what have I done? You think you can steal from a goo group and blackmail a senior staff? Another officer barked. Steal? Johnny's voice cracked. I would never. One officer grabbed him by the collar. You insulted your madam and threatened to expose her unless she allowed you to marry her daughter? Johnny's eyes widened. No, I never. A slap landed across his face. The shoemaker's tools scattered across the ground. His small wooden stool toppled over. Passers-by watched, but no one dared speak. It was night, and in Nigeria, no one challenges police at night. Jacinta arrived at that exact moment, just in time to see Johnny being pushed into the police van. "Johnny," she screamed, running toward him. He turned sharply. Their eyes met, his filled with fear and confusion, hers with terror. "Jacinta, tell them I didn't." But before he finished speaking, the officers dragged him away and slammed the door shut. Jacinta banged on the van, sobbing, "Please, he's innocent. He didn't do anything. Leave him." The van drove off, its sirens echoing into the night, leaving Jacinta collapsing on the ground, pounding her fists against the tar road. Johnny had been taken, and she knew exactly who was responsible. When Jacinta returned home at dawn, exhausted and swollen from crying, she found her mother sitting calmly in the living room, sipping tea, as if nothing had happened. "Mummy," Jacinta whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why? Why did you do that? Johnny didn't steal anything. He didn't threaten you. He loves me." Grace didn't look up. "That's your business. Mine was to protect my family name." "You framed him," Jacinta screamed through her tears. "So," Grace said without emotion, "better one shoemaker in prison than my daughter married to poverty." Jacinta staggered backward. This wasn't strictness. This wasn't anger. This was evil. "Mummy, I'm pregnant. Where do you want me to—" Grace stood slowly. "You are no longer my daughter." Jacinta froze. "Mummy? What?" Grace walked to the bedroom, dragged out a big Ghana Musco bag, threw Jacinta's clothes inside, and returned with it. She flung it at Jacinta's feet. "Take your things and get out." The room spun. "Mummy, I'm carrying your grandchild," Grace hissed. "I don't have a bastard grandchild." Those words stabbed deeper than any knife. Jacinta clutched her stomach protectively and shook her head. "Mummy, please." Grace walked to the door, swung it open, and pointed outside. "Out!" Jacinta looked around helplessly. "Where will I go?" "That's your problem," Grace said. "Follow your shoemaker." "Oh, wait, he's in prison." Jacinta's knees buckled. "Please, let me stay until morning. I'm weak. I'm carrying a child." "Out of my house now!" Grace pushed her hard. Jacinta stumbled outside into the cold night, barefoot, clutching her small bag, her stomach cramped with pain, tears streaming down her face. The door slammed shut. That sound would haunt her forever. Homeless. Her life changed instantly. The night swallowed her as she walked, shaking, along the empty streets. She tried calling friends, but no one answered. Those who did claimed they were not around, busy, unable to help. Pregnancy had a way of turning sympathy into avoidance. By morning, her legs were swollen, and she sat under the shade of a closed shop. She hadn't eaten since the previous day. People passed her. Some stared, some whispered, some crossed to the other side of the road. A few gave her looks filled with disgust. In Nigeria, a pregnant homeless girl wasn't seen as a victim. She was judged as wayward, irresponsible, promiscuous. Jacinta felt her world shrinking. Her stomach growled painfully. She begged for food. She begged for water. No one cared. By the third day, she could barely walk. Her lips were cracked. Her feet were swollen. Her clothes were dirty. Her once glowing face was now pale and drained. She wandered into the wealthier part of town. Maybe someone there would show mercy. But even there, pity was scarce. One scorching afternoon, Jacinta found herself in front of a luxurious outdoor restaurant. Wealthy men and women ate expensive meals under large umbrellas. The smell of food hit her like a punch to the stomach. She held her stomach, dizzy. She tried not to beg. She tried to be strong, but strength has limits. Her eyes fell on a man sitting alone at a reserved table. He wore a simple shirt, but there was an aura around him. Power, money, authority. He was no ordinary man. This was Chief Agu, one of the richest men in the state. She tried to walk away, but her legs buckled, and she stumbled forward, almost falling. Before she knew what she was doing, she stepped toward his table and knelt. "Sir, please," she whispered, voice cracking. "I'm pregnant and hungry. Can I have your leftover?" The entire restaurant gasped. Customers stared. A waiter froze. A couple whispered, "How shameless." But Agu looked at Jacinta, really looked at her. Her trembling hands, her swollen feet, her sunburnt skin, her broken spirit. Something in his chest tightened. Instead of shooing her away, he signaled the waiter. Bring her a fresh plate of food and water immediately. Gasps spread again. Jacinta lifted her eyes in shock, tears spilling. Agu leaned forward. My daughter, he said quietly. Who did this to you? And for the first time since her suffering began, Jacinta felt seen. She felt heard. She felt hope. For a moment, Jacinta forgot how to breathe. Chief Agu's voice was calm, too calm for a man who had just been publicly begged by a dirty, pregnant stranger collapsing at his feet. People stared with their forks suspended midair. Some whispered, others looked annoyed, as if her suffering were an inconvenience to their appetites. But Agu ignored them all. He kept his eyes on the young woman kneeling before him, the girl whose clothes were dusty, whose hair was scattered, whose swollen feet revealed nights of walking and days of hunger. She didn't look like someone who belonged on the streets. She looked like someone who had been pushed there. Sit, Agu said gently, pulling out the chair opposite him. Jacinta hesitated. No one had spoken to her with kindness in weeks. If I sit, she whispered, they will chase me away. Agu almost smiled at the innocence in her voice. No one, he said firmly, will touch you while I am here. She sat, slowly, weakly, as if any wrong movement would break her bones. A waiter rushed back with a large plate of jollof rice, chicken, and cold bottled water. Jacinta stared at it with disbelief. Her hands trembled as she picked up the bottle. Agu noticed her struggle and opened it for her. Drink slowly, he warned. She nodded, but thirst made her gulp too fast. Water spilled down her chin. She coughed, embarrassed, wiping her mouth. I'm sorry, sir. I'm just hungry, he finished gently. Eat. She didn't need to be told twice. For a full minute, her world reduced to food, real food, warm food. Her belly trembled with gratitude. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she ate. She tried to hide them, but Agu saw everything. He waited until she took her first deep breath in weeks. Then he asked again, voice low, who did this to you? Jacinta froze. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled on the plate. Her eyes clouded with fear. I don't want to cause trouble, she murmured. Agu leaned forward. Trouble has already found you, he said. Tell me the truth. She swallowed hard, and then the gates broke. Jacinta's story. Jacinta told him everything. Her love story, her mother's disapproval, the pregnancy, the slap, the curses, the sudden arrest, the false accusations, the night she was pushed out of her home with nothing but a bag of clothes, the day she begged for food, the night she slept outside holding her stomach so her unborn baby wouldn't feel the cold. Agu's expression changed slowly from curiosity to concern to controlled anger. When she mentioned Johnny's arrest, he stiffened. Johnny? He asked sharply. What is his full name? Johnny, she swallowed. Johnny Okizi. Agu's eyes narrowed. And your mother? Her name is Grace. Madam Grace Udo. She works at Agu Group of Companies. She's a senior supervisor. Agu leaned back slowly. The sun was bright, the restaurant hum continued, but for a moment the world paused around him. Of all the places Jacinta would have wandered, of all the tables she could have begged from, of all the men she could have knelt before, she knelt before the one man connected to both Johnny and her mother. Agu's voice deepened. What exactly did your mother accuse Johnny of? Jacinta sniffed. She said he stole company documents and threatened her. But Johnny isn't like that. He doesn't even know anyone in her office. He's gentle, quiet, too honest to steal a pin. Agu clenched his jaw. He knew Johnny. He knew him very well. But Jacinta didn't know that, not yet. Where's Johnny now? Agu asked. He's in prison, sir, she sobbed. They beat him when they arrested him. He never fought back. They said he tried to blackmail my mother, but he didn't. I swear he didn't. Agu's fingers tightened around his fork. Madam Grace, her arrogance, her sharp tongue, her thirst for power. He had been hearing complaints about her recently, junior staff claiming she bullied them, manipulated files, and abused her office. But he had been too busy preparing for a major shareholders meeting to pay attention. Now he wished he hadn't ignored the signs. How cruel could a mother be? Agu exhaled slowly. Jacinta, he said, finish your food. After that, follow me. She stopped eating, fear flooding her eyes. To where? To somewhere safe. Somewhere you can rest. But sir, you don't know me. I don't want to be a burden. You're pregnant and homeless, Agu replied. That makes you my responsibility today. Jacinta pressed a hand to her stomach, trembling. Thank you, sir, she whispered. But the real surprise was still ahead. A home after darkness, the drive to Agu's mansion was long and quiet. Jacinta stared out the window, overwhelmed. She had never seen such luxury. Smooth roads, tall palm trees, endless rows of mansions. Sir, are you sure I should follow you? What if people think I don't know, using you? Agu looked at her through the rearview mirror. Let people think what they want, he said calmly. I help who needs help. When they reached his estate gate, Jacinta gasped. Security guards greeted him with deep bows. The gates opened like the entrance to a palace. Jacinta clutched her bag tighter. Sir, I can't stay here. This place is too... Quiet, Agu offered. Safe? Clean? She nodded in small embarrassment. This is exactly where you need to be. He walked her into the mansion. A maid rushed forward. Prepare the guest room, Agu instructed. She will be staying here. Yes, sir. Jacinta looked around the room. A harsh room, soft bed, flowing curtains, a bathroom that sparkled more than her mother's entire house. Tears filled her eyes again. Sir, why are you helping me like this? Agu sighed and crossed his arms. Because your story is painful, he said, and because I despise injustice. He paused. And because I know Johnny. Jacinta's head shot up. You know Johnny? Agu nodded. And tomorrow morning, we are going to get him out of prison. Her mouth fell open. You can free him? Agu's voice hardened. Your mother used her position to destroy an innocent man. I will use mine to set him free. Jacinta burst into tears and knelt down in gratitude. Sir, please. Thank you. Thank you. Agu gently helped her stand. Rest, he said. Eat. You will need your strength. Because tomorrow morning, everything changes. Jacinta nodded, wiping her tears. She didn't know how big that change would be. She didn't know Agu was not just powerful. He was the billionaire. And she definitely didn't know that Johnny, her humble shoemaker, was much more than he appeared. The truth was coming, and it would shake her entire world. Jacinta barely slept that night. Even with the comfort of a soft mattress beneath her and the scent of clean sheets surrounding her, her heart beat with a familiar heaviness. Fear, guilt, and a tiny flicker of hope she didn't dare trust. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Johnny's face the moment he was dragged away. His confusion, his pain, his helplessness. By morning, she was sitting upright on the bed when a soft knock sounded on the door. Come in, she whispered. A maid stepped in with a tray of food. Sir said you should eat before you leave. Jacinta blinked. Leave? Where? To the court, madam, to see about your fiancé. Her heart tightened. Fiancé. The word felt blessed and cursed all at once. After eating a few bites, Agu came to the door himself, already dressed in a sharp black suit. His presence filled the room with authority. Ready? He asked. She nodded, clutching her bag nervously. The fight begins. The first place Agu took her was his private law firm, an entire building dedicated to handling cases for his companies. Inside, a tall man in glasses rose immediately. Good morning, Chief. Morning, Agu said. This is Jacinta. She needs justice. Jacinta bowed slightly, still shaky. Agu turned to the lawyer. I want you to reopen Johnny O'Casey's case. Dig into everything. Files, statements, police reports, and especially any internal documents involving Madame Grace Udo. The lawyer's eyes widened. Sir, that is your senior supervisor. And, Agu's voice was cold, if she abused her office to punish an innocent man, she will answer for it. The lawyer nodded firmly. Understood. Within minutes, files were being pulled, documents were printed, and calls were made to the police station. Jacinta watched all of it with trembling hands. She felt useless, standing, crying silently, praying under her breath. Jacinta, Agu said calmly, sit. She obeyed, but her heart refused to settle. After nearly 2 hours of work, The lawyer returned. Sir, I've reviewed the case file. And? Agu's eyes sharpened. It's full of inconsistencies. He dropped a stack of papers on the table. The signature on the theft report isn't Johnny's. The documents he supposedly stole don't even belong to Madame Grace's department. And the police report was rushed and incomplete. This case is fabricated. Jacinta let out a sob. I knew it. I knew Johnny would never steal. Agu nodded. We have enough to get him released on bail by afternoon. Thank you, sir, Jacinta whispered. But the lawyer raised a finger. There is more. Agu frowned slightly. Continue. It appears Madame Grace influenced the officers directly. She used her company authority to create the impression Johnny was a threat. That's why they came so aggressively. Jacinta felt sick. She pressed her palm over her stomach, trying to calm her racing heart. Agu inhaled deeply, slow and controlled. So she abused my company to destroy a man's life. He stood abruptly. Let's get Johnny out, at the prison. The prison was crowded, hot, and humid. As they walked through the corridors, Jacinta's eyes searched every face, every shadow. When she finally saw Johnny, her heart broke. He sat on a bench, bruised, lips cracked, looking thinner than she remembered. His head was bowed until the guard called his name. Johnny O'Casey, court order. He looked up, and his eyes landed on her. Jacinta, he whispered. She burst into tears. She wanted to run into his arms, but she held herself still because of the guards. Johnny stood slowly, wincing from the pain of the beatings he had endured. Agu stepped forward. I'm Chief Agu, he said. I'm getting you out. Johnny stared at him, confused. Agu, as in Agu Group? Yes, Agu replied, and you were wrongfully imprisoned. Johnny looked at Jacinta, who was shaking with guilt. I'm so sorry, she cried. Johnny, I'm so sorry. He raised a weak hand, silencing her gently. There was no anger in his eyes, only exhaustion and love. Let's go, Agu said. And as they walked out of the prison, Jacinta felt the first breath of freedom she had tasted in weeks. The suspense before the storm. By afternoon, they stood outside the courthouse. Your charges will be dropped today, Agu assured. Johnny nodded quietly, but something about him felt different, calm, too calm, as if he knew far more than Jacinta understood. Agu looked from Johnny to Jacinta, then back at Johnny. Tomorrow, Agu said slowly, everything will be revealed. Johnny's eyes softened. Jacinta frowned. What will be revealed? Agu smiled faintly, but said nothing. Johnny looked at her lovingly, but with a secret burning behind his eyes. Jacinta, he whispered, tomorrow will change your life. She didn't know whether to be afraid or hopeful, but one thing was certain. The next morning, Jacinta woke up with a strange flutter in her chest, fear and hope wrestling inside her. She dressed slowly, touching her growing stomach, whispering a silent prayer for strength. Today was the day Johnny's court hearing would take place. Today she would face her mother again. Agu met her at the door. Are you ready? He asked. No, she whispered honestly, but I have no choice. Johnny was already waiting outside by Agu's car, cleaned up, hair trimmed, dressed in clothes that were simple, but strangely elegant. The bruises on his face had begun to fade, but something else was different. Something Jacinta couldn't understand. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't fearful. He had a quiet confidence, like a man standing in his destiny. When their eyes met, Jacinta burst into tears. She rushed into his arms, holding him tightly. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm so sorry for everything. Johnny rested one hand on her back. Don't cry, he whispered. It's almost over. She didn't know what he meant, but Agu did, and the knowing look he shared with Johnny only deepened her confusion. The courtroom was packed. People filled every bench, whispering, waiting for the scandal involving Madame Grace to unfold. Grace herself arrived wearing a sharp corporate suit, pretending confidence she didn't feel. Her eyes widened when she saw Jacinta. You brought her here, she hissed. Jacinta stepped back in fear, but Agu moved forward. I did, he said firmly. Grace paled. Chief Agu, you came personally? I always come personally when my staff misuse my company for wickedness, he replied, voice cold enough to freeze stone. Whispers spread like wildfire. Madame Grace swallowed hard. Then the judge entered, and the hearing began. Grace's lies unravel. The prosecutor read the accusations: theft of company documents, attempted blackmail, workplace harassment. Johnny stood quietly while the courtroom buzzed with tension. Then Agu's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, we have evidence showing these charges were fabricated." Gasps spread. The lawyer laid out everything. The signatures on the reports were forged. The documents Johnny supposedly stole didn't belong to Grace's department. Witness statements were coerced. Police were pressured to arrest Johnny without investigation. Grace used the company name, Agu Group, to intimidate officers. Finally, the lawyer turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this is not a case of theft. This is a case of personal hatred, abuse of office, and malicious intent." Grace stood suddenly. "This is nonsense. I am a loyal senior staff." Agu rose. "Sit down, Grace." His voice silenced the entire courtroom. She slowly sat, trembling visibly. The twist, the judge looked at Agu. "Chief Agu, would you like to address the court?" Agu stepped forward. "Your Honor, I have personally reviewed the case. Johnny Okezi did not commit any crime. He was framed. And I know this because—" Agu paused, then looked directly at Johnny. "Because Johnny is not just a casual worker in my company." The room erupted in whispers. Grace blinked rapidly. What are you saying?" Agu continued. "Johnny is my junior business partner, a silent shareholder, a man of integrity." A loud gasp swept across the courtroom. Jacinta covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her face. "Johnny, a partner, a millionaire?" Grace shook her head violently. "That's impossible. He's just a shoemaker." Johnny finally stepped forward, calm and steady. "I chose to work as a shoemaker," he said softly. "I wanted to experience life outside wealth. I wanted to understand real people. And I wanted to find someone who would love me without knowing what I had." Jacinta's knees almost gave out. He had been testing life, testing people, testing loyalty, and she had passed. Johnny turned toward her, eyes filled with emotion. "You loved me when I had nothing," he said. "Or when you thought I had nothing. That is the kind of love I prayed for." Jacinta couldn't speak. She sobbed uncontrollably, overwhelmed by everything. Madame Grace, on the other hand, screamed, "You lied to us! You tricked my daughter!" Johnny turned to her calmly. "Did I lie or did you judge? I never claimed to be rich. But I never claimed to be poor either. You assumed." Grace froze. His words sliced her pride open. "Judgment," the judge banged the gavel. "Order." After reviewing the forged documents, illegal arrest procedures, and Johnny's clean record, the judge declared, "All charges against Mr. Johnny Okezi are dismissed. He is innocent." Applause erupted. Grace trembled as the judge continued. "In Madame Grace Udo, for abuse of power and filing false accusations, your case is being forwarded to the company board and appropriate authorities." Grace collapsed into her chair, shaking uncontrollably. Agu turned to her, eyes stern. "You are fired. Immediately." She gasped. "Chief, please. My job, my reputation, my life." "You destroyed a man's freedom," he said. "May you face yours." Security escorted her out as she cried hysterically. Jacinta couldn't bear to look. This was still her mother, but Johnny held her hand gently. "Forgive her," he whispered. "One day, when you're ready." The wedding. 2 days later, Agu invited them to his private garden. Flowers lined the walkway. Soft music played. Only a few people were present, the lawyer, a pastor, and 2 witnesses. Jacinta wore a simple white gown Agu bought for her, flowing, elegant, beautiful. Her pregnancy bump showed slightly, glowing under the sunlight. Johnny stood waiting at the altar, handsome in a tailored suit, his eyes warm with love. When Jacinta walked toward him, tears filled her eyes again. "You deserve better than all the pain you suffered," Johnny whispered as he held her hands. "But I promise you peace from today onward." Jacinta cried, "I loved you when you were a shoemaker. I love you now." "Nothing changed." He smiled. "That's why I chose you." They exchanged vows, quiet, sincere, full of promises born